In the early 1980s, Disney's feature film division was having trouble producing any movies that were beyond mediocre. It was this fact that set Tom Wilhite out in search of new talent. Tom Wilhite was then head of production of Walt Disney Studios. In his search for young filmmakers, the name Walter Murch came across his desk. Walter Murch was not unknown to the entertainment industry. He was even nominated for 3 Academy Awards, in which he took one home for his sound orchestrations in Apocalypse Now.
This LD's still pretty hot, sir. Maybe you ought to surf somewhere else.
What do you know about surfing, Major? You're from goddamn New Jersey. Come here. Change.
You mean right now, sir?
I want to see how radical that stuff is. Go change.
Still pretty hairy out there, sir.
You want to surf, soldier?
Yes, sir.
That's good, son, because you either surf or fight. That's clear. Now get going. I'll come aboard. And bring aboard for land.
At a meeting between Wilhite and Murch, the Disney exec asked what project Walter might be interested in. Walter explained on how he had always wanted to do another Oz movie based on later books by L. Frank Baum. Coincidentally, the Disney studio had held the rights to all of Baum's novels, except for the first, since the 1950s. After a few negotiations, it was decided that Walter Murch would write and direct a non-musical adaptation of the later Baum books. After the production deal was completed, Walter Murch was joined by producer friend Gary Kurtz. Kurtz helped manage the Oz project as well as bring a creative strength. He was also not new to the fantasy film genre. Kurtz worked with George Lucas on Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. But Kurtz then parted ways with Lucas and went on to produce the Jim Henson's fantasy, The Dark Crystal.
The Dark Crystal. It begins as a quest.
You must find the shard. The crystal shard.
The crystal shard?
To save our world, Guiltling.
A wonder-filled fantasy adventure. Journey into a mystical realm of sights and sounds. Enter the world of the Dark Crystal.
What's it for? Is that what you want to know? You want to know what this is all about? Is that it, Gelfling?
Now from directors Jim Henson and Frank Oz and Gary Kurtz, the producer of Star Wars, comes a new dimension of fantasy and adventure. Travel to another world, another time, in the age of wonder. The Dark Crystal.
It was this experience, combined with Walter Murch, that gave Return to Oz the creative strength it needed. The story that Murch and Kurtz elected to tell would combine the second and third book in the Oz series. Screenwriter Gil Dennis collaborated with Murch to write the story. This time around, the story was also to be centered on a little girl from Kansas, Dorothy Gale. Dorothy was a main character in the third book, but she was missing from the second. Dennis and Murch decided to fuse the two books together and include Dorothy in both the books' adventures. For a project this size, a pre-production period was a must. In fact, a 3-year pre-production period would undergo before any filming began. It was at this time that Norman Reynolds was hired to bring the Oz characters to life. He would base the characters on drawings from the original books by John R. Neal. Then, in November of 1983, Richard Berger became president of the Walt Disney Company. By this point, some $6 million had already been spent on Disney's Oz project. It was then decided by Mr. Berger that he would write off the $6 million and stop production on Disney's Return to Oz. This decision came from the fact that Disney movies at the time tended to go way over budget. But eventually, a compromise was made and Return to Oz was back in production, this time with a strict budget of $25 million. Mr. Berger then brought to the project producer Paul Menslansky to help, quote, keep an eye on the budget. Mr. Menslansky at the time was well known for producing the Police Academy films. The change promoted Gary Kurtz to executive producer. Finally, over all these hurdles, the shooting for Return to Oz began on February 20th of 1984 at Elstree Studios in England. But this was only the beginning for Disney's Return to Oz.